Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
I used to be such a good liar.
You brought a cyberman into my TARDIS!
I created you!
And I am superior to you.
Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Diana.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Reilly.
And this episode, we're going to do our Big Finish bonus episode for Season 19. Now, I know we didn't manage to do one for Season 18. Yes, your comments were observed, Nathan. But sometimes life gets in the way, and these are bonus episodes, so they're not 100% guaranteed each season. However, Season 19 presents us with an amazing opportunity. A story that fandom considers to be one of the absolute all-time Big Finish greats, Spare Parts. As usual for these bonus episodes, we're going to jump right in with what behind-the-scenes information we have. Now, this is one of the earlier Big Finish releases, number 34 from their monthly range of stories, which was, of course, the first range they did, and was released at the end of July 2002, having been recorded at the tail end of March 2002. The author of this one is Mark Platt, who we haven't yet encountered in the classic era, but actually is quite a big name-ish, certainly for Big Finish. He wrote the season 26 story Ghostlight, which has the distinction of being the last classic era story to be recorded, although it wasn't the last to be broadcast. Following the cancellation of the show, he wrote the unofficial spin-off Downtime. In written media, he novelized both Ghostlight and Battlefield for the Target range, both of those being from season 26, as well as Cat's Cradle times Crucible and Lung Barrow for the Virgin New Adventures range, and the novelization of Downtime for the Virgin Missing Adventures range. Prior to Spare Parts, he wrote the Fifth Doctor werewolf story Loup-Garou for Big Finish, and he will go on to write quite a lot more for our favourite audio company. He was initially reluctant to write a Cyberman story when the idea was pitched to him, as he felt that their plausibility as a villain during the history of the series had really declined over the years. But he soon came to see that he could write an origin story and realised that he could go back to basics of what the Cybermen were originally intended to be by their creator, Dr. Kit Pedler, a morality on over-augmentation of humanity. Platt also wanted the story to be a tragedy. While the other great villains of the show, the Daleks, were driven by Nazi-like beliefs, the Mondasians were originally human, and Platt decided to write a story of how humans could become so desperate that they would reject their humanity, including their emotions, in order to survive. Directing Spare Parts, we have Doctor Who legend Gary Russell, who we've talked about in prior bonus episodes. He doubles up as one of the co-producers, being joined by a friend of the podcast and Big Finish CEO Jason Haigh-Ellery. Providing music for Spare Parts, we have Russell Stone, who was a regular contributor in the early days of Big Finish, providing music for 17 releases between May 2000 and July 2005. And as sound designer, we have Gareth Jenkins, who is another prolific Big Finisher, working on a total of 57 releases over the course of about 8 years. And so with that, we're going to move straight into our discussion. So firstly, how bloody good was that?
Oh, I teared up a little bit there. There's some real sad moments, and It's been a while since a Big Finish has made me feel all the feels.
Yeah.
It was incredibly intense. I will definitely say that. Some parts I think could have been a little stronger, but it is pretty bold and intense.
For sure.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed.
So this tackles an origin of the Cybermen story, a genesis of the Cybermen, if you will. The new series has now done this twice, notably with the rise of the Cybermen in the Age of Steel, and then World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls. How successful did you all think this was as a Cybermen origin story?
I believe it works pretty well. It fits in with a kind of invasion of the body snatchers situation, but what I mean by that, I'm talking about the one from I guess both the 70s film and the 50s film provide this idea that it's actually beneficial for the whole to become pod people, or in this case, they look at it as their survival is dependent on that in the future. That is a very good element. I think that's a very good way for Cybermen to be handled, especially as a birth story, because it is certainly something that you could see a society find themselves moving into, especially humans who have such a love of novelty and technology.
I think it said it all in the behind the scenes that Mark Platt wanted to go back to the original idea behind the Cybermen, which is that fear of technology being overused and us becoming less than human because of it. And I think we really saw that in The 10th Planet and in some of those other early Cybermen stories, particularly The Tomb of the Cybermen. So I thought it was really, really successful in the way it did that.
Yeah, I like the way that, especially the way it built on the concept that we need this in even our world, that, you know, we have artificial organs and organ transplants and artificial limbs. And it was just growing that concept that that's where that leads to eventually.
Where's the tipping points and where does it go too far?
Yeah, where are we on that trajectory?
Map with "you are here."
Yeah.
It's probably one of those situations where would I see the human race go more towards Cybermen or more towards Daleks? And it's definitely Cybermen.
Oh, 100%.
There are just certain moments where you just sit there and you're like, man, this is kind of crazy. When someone's shoulder isn't working anymore and they're just like, well, we'll just replace your entire body. And you'll just now be a what? It's that extreme of you need it for one thing and then we're just going to now go all the way in.
And that led to some really hard parts. I mean, Yvonne is one of the most tragic characters. She's effectively dying of what's implied to be tuberculosis.
They stated at the end.
Yeah, they mentioned consumption.
Yeah,
Yes.
Acute consumption is tuberculosis.
And she's turned into a Cyberman. And because of the timing of the blackout, the process isn't fully done. And there's just enough of Yvonne's original personality in there. And that was so haunting, so tragic. I assume, Julie, that's probably the part that brought a little bit of a tear to your eye.
Yes, it was incredibly sad. And it's one of those situations, and it happens in a lot of film, right? When someone is turning into something else that's quote unquote less than human or something along those lines. And that's always the saddest part, is partially, you know, obviously for her, but her father and brother to see it as well is also really sad.
And they sort of try and crib that a little in that first Tennant Cybermen story, where the Doctor turns off the emotional inhibitor in that one Cyberman, and to the point where Mark Platt in that two-parter actually got a with special thanks credit, because they did actually take a fair amount from this story.
I want to talk about a few of the other things that I found interesting, and it's good old propaganda. That opening just sounding good old school propaganda, commercial advertisement, whatever you want to call it.
It's those old Pathé film reels that they used to show before movies in the 20s through the 50s.
I loved that. That was a brilliant opening. And they use it throughout, not necessarily exactly the real bit of it, but just the constant, hey, you're doing this for your world. I guess not country, but you're doing it for us. You're doing it for the race. Everything is better. People never came back, but they still glorified it as if that was the next best thing that you can do. Obviously, the brother, for the longest part of this, who was obnoxious for a very long time, he bought into it and he was very upset. And it's very interesting when you see propaganda gone awry.
Right.
That's actually one of the things that I thought they did very well, was giving enough characters different points of view towards the propaganda that you could really see how it affects several aspects of life, from the people who put out the propaganda, the people that receive it, that there were the different levels of adhering to what the propaganda is actually stating. And I thought that that was honestly masterfully done.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it does also make you question how much of what we're being told in the propaganda is actually true. We're told that this is the last settlement on Mondas, but is that true? Or is that just the propaganda?
I was given to think that most of the people have bought so hard into the propaganda that they at the very least believe that it's true. I don't think we ran into anybody that didn't believe in the propaganda.
We certainly didn't, but it kind of makes you think, can you rely on what we're being told, or is there a bit more to it? Obviously, we think the story ends a little bit of a happy ending before Zhang makes a surprise last appearance. But if there is another settlement on the planet, then perhaps that explains what, because you'd think an entire city, even if it is only a few hundred, a few thousand people, can fight off one Cyberman. But if there's another settlement doing the same thing, that makes it a lot harder if they're invaded effectively. Because we know how this story ends. It ends with the death of Adric, damn it.
Damn it.
The closest person, I guess, who didn't believe in the propaganda was the doctor lady. I got really bad with the names.
Dr. Allen, yes.
Yes. She was the closest one to just not believing it. But also, I think she was just so jaded by the end that when her favorite thing is just, I'm just going to drink because I don't care anymore.
I felt that hard.
But I totally understand where she's coming from. She's really the only one, right, who's doing this. She's the one who's seeing what happens to all these people. And that's taken its toll to the point where she's just like, there's nothing else I can do. Everything is terrible. And I'm just going to drink myself under a table. And I understand.
Incidentally, she was played by Sally Nivette, who was one of the leads in the first 2 seasons of Blake 7.
Oh, okay.
So some really nice casting there for her. But yeah, let's talk about some of the other characters, because they are pretty important. You've got the family unit. We talked about Yvonne. We talked a little bit about Frank. There's obviously the dad. And we also have System and Constant and Thomas Dodd. I think Thomas Dodd is spectacular. He's one of my favorite characters in this whole thing. He's so sketchy.
There was a split second there where I was like, this guy's going to be a little obnoxious and almost too sketchy, and almost reminded me too much of the character in the Polar Express who's up on the top as played by Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah.
But this guy was much better. He grew on me because of the depth that they gave the character.
Well, and the other thing that was pretty cool about him, and I'm going to give you all a little bit of a throwback and see how much you remember season 1 of classic Doctor Who. The actor Darren Nisbet played Tigana in Marco Polo.
Oh, wow.
Shut up. Cool.
That's a real throwback.
That is.
He's actually still alive. He has just turned 90.
Wow.
Oh, buddy.
Not still working. His last credit was about 5 years ago.
I get that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be working at 90. Fuck that.
Oh, man. I really did end up liking all the characters. Some come across when they're first brought into the scene. Sister Constance or whatever, she was frustrating, but then you also see where she came from because she was high on the pill of the propaganda. She was all in. And then when she sees it turned back on her, there was a small part of me that was like, finally you understand, but also like it sucks now that you understand.
Nah, fuck that bitch.
No, I had very little sympathy for her.
Yeah, no, she's awful.
Yeah, the only point that she showed any regret was when it turned into, let's convert everyone. Let's process everyone.
You're going to convert me, but I'm above it all. I'm special.
That makes her a good character.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. She was my villain for this story, 100%.
This comes into a reference that Reilly will certainly be familiar of. I voted for the leopards eating people's faces party, but I didn't think they would eat my face.
Right. I guess in this one, I didn't think the Cyberman would assimilate me. That's exactly what I thought for that character, but that works, you know? That's just human behavior at its clearest right there. I thought that character was very interesting. I did enjoy that. I think that is something that's very important because it provided more of an opportunity for the Cybermen to flourish. And this is never something that's going to work for them if it's just a brute force attack until they get their numbers up. It has to be slow and subtle within a population.
Sorry, I'm going a little all over the place.
Yeah, I noticed.
Talking about some of the ancillary characters, there's one that's often mentioned but we never actually meet called Eric Crailford. And there is a Cyberman in the 10th Planet. Remember in the 10th Planet they all had names? There's a Cyberman called Crail in the 10th Planet, and Mark Platt has mentioned in interviews that he intended for that person to become Cyberman Crail, which I thought was really cool.
Huh. That's cool.
So he was making a lot of effort to really tie this back into the 10th Planet without it being too fanwanky.
And I feel like we've gone through, at this point, so many different versions of the Cybermen on the show. I don't know why, but I can't figure out what era voice that they are using for this audio.
They're the 10th Planet voices. They are the original ones.
Okay. That's why it sounded distant. Okay.
So one of my comments was, why can't I use closed captioning?
Oh, so bad.
You probably needed it for the committee, right?
I really did.
Because the sing-songy Cyberman you were probably okay with, but the committee, the one that was very heavily distorted,
Yeah.
It was one of the things that's going to affect how I feel about it is that I couldn't follow the Cybermen without the subtitles. It was just too distorted, where I was like, I can catch every, let's say, 8th word. And other than that, I just couldn't follow what they were saying without like closing my eyes and really focusing.
Yeah, and I was driving while I was listening, so I couldn't do that.
No, that would be bad.
The joy of a slightly longer commute these days.
You know, this Big Finish also introduced us something that I'm surprised the show hasn't done. At least I don't recall the show doing it from New Who and how far we've gotten up onto classical. But cyber animals, very disturbing.
We've met the Cybmats, but the horse was something about
I
new.
don't consider them because it hits closer when you know it's like a companion animal or a mammal.
That's fair. What they did was they made it more of a pet. And I never felt that it was a pet until, in the What's That One Matt Smith episode, it kind of felt almost pet-ish there. But no, here is where it actually was like, oh, they were originally intended to be companions until such a point that they then also went off the rails like the rest of the Cybermen.
And I had never connected that they were supposed to be rats.
The Cybmats, yeah.
Oh, I never got that either.
Yeah, now I have a mat catcher, and I thought that whole through line was absolutely fabulous. The mat catcher is the one that saves the day.
Yeah, and no one would have thought that would happen. I really like the dad character, actually. He's very sympathetic, unlike his piece of shit son. Fucking Frank.
But I want to go to the front line.
Yeah, it's amazing how that societal and familial pressure can turn someone into kind of a dick. I mean, this was more societal than familial.
That was definitely societal because the dad was not impressed.
No. And particularly after they all see what happened to Yvonne, and the dad does have his moments of, doesn't say it quite this directly, but see, this is what would have happened to you.
He does say something to the effect of like, and this is what you wanted.
Yeah.
That whole part of the story being the most emotional is one that I would have really loved to have seen on screen, just because it was beautifully acted. I think it would have been a beautiful scene too.
100%. It's a shame the version of Yvonne's scene that we eventually saw in the 10th Doctor era was so watered down.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they'd given it that emotional punch. Maybe, and I know I'm talking so far ahead of where we are in the actual TV show, but maybe making the cyberized Jackie have that kind of thing would have packed one hell of an emotional gut punch.
Mm-hmm.
But, people can't handle those types of things.
Yeah, I can be a bit dark sometimes, I guess.
It's a family show, Anthony.
Let's make it grimdark. Let's have Doctor Who made by Zack Snyder.
Oh, boy.
Goddamn. I do think they do that with other entities, though, in Modern Who, where they're like, oh, they're halfway subsumed into a, fat glob. Let's have them have emotional crisis, talking out of his butt.
But you just can't have that as one of the main characters or parts of their family, unless you go for Bill Potts. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, right.
Hey, don't forget Danny Pink.
Yeah, they did go there with Danny.
I mean, Moffat was a lot more prone to doing that kind of thing than RTD, just because Moffat writing tends to be a bit darker.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.
No, he doesn't, and good for him. He shouldn't. Do your thing, Stephen.
That's the heart of this story that makes it not a boring original origin story. I don't need another Spider-Man origin story. We can go a long time without one now. And honestly, when I realized that this was an origin of Mondas, I was like, I don't know. I don't tend to find origin stories fun because you have to do so much groundwork. But the incorporation of that emotional through line through it made all of the groundwork build around it to where I wasn't bored through it.
And Diana, this is the first Big Finish bonus you've done with us.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do one for season 18. Normally, what I've historically done has been to say these are all the stories that happen during the course of this season or between this season and the next. We'll do a little vote on which one we want to do. This was one where I just made an executive decision of this one is so good, and I think coming so soon after Earthshock and having Nissa's reaction to the Cybermen, it packs enough of an emotional gut punch, and I think is strong enough where I just said, nope, this is the one we're doing.
It's definitely one that I'd heard of.
Yeah.
I have heard people talk about spare parts. I didn't know in what context. I just know that of all the Big Finishes, there are certain ones that you might hear like whisperings of, and this was one of them.
Yeah, it's like when we get to the 8th Doctor, we will be doing the Chimes of Midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Which incidentally was quoted heavily at a party that a few of us were at on Saturday night.
Oh.
Alan picked up on it.
That makes sense. I would not have picked up on it because reasons.
All I'm going to say is Reilly has shifty eyes.
How dare you? I'm completely honest.
Definitely not a secret Hitler.
No, definitely not.
We played a role deception game called Secret Hitler.
I love that game.
I was a liberal the entire time. All 3 times. Thank you very much.
I was never Hitler, but I was a fascist at one point.
I've never played, but I love the game. I watch it on the YouTube.
Oh.
Outstanding. Bring us back to spare parts.
Right.
No Big Finish is complete without me talking about a few things. One, interesting that this is one of the first ones that they did, because I still thought that the audio was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go overboard with music for once.
No. What I would say is it was early, but they'd been doing this for about 3 years. They were just moving slow at this point in time.
The only problem was the Cybermen, but I understood why, and that was because they were channeling earlier Doctor Who. Maybe they shouldn't have gone that direction. It was very close to the original, so I'm not going to ding them for it.
Right.
The other thing that I found interesting is that of all the doctors or doctor impersonators, I guess, with Fraser Hines, he sounded the most different. He sounded much older, much older.
Well, and if you think about it, when he took the role, he was so incredibly young. He was, I think, 29, and this would have been 23 years later, so he's in his 50s here. I think I sound a lot different to how I did 8 years ago when I was 29 at 37. I mean, I get it, and certainly not mad at him.
I'm not saying I'm mad per se, but I just find it interesting that of all the ones we've listened to, he sounds the most different. Even with some of the Tom Baker, when it's Tom Baker much older, Tom Baker still sounds more like Tom Baker.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I definitely had a moment where I went, oh, that's the Doctor talking. Specifically because we are so deep in his original season. And so coming off of his very youthful voice and getting his I'm a man voice was very like, oh, gosh, that is the same person just 20 odd years later.
A little unexpected.
That took some getting used to. And on the rare occasion, I'd be like, this is the Doctor. This is the Doctor. But they did a very good job with the dialogue. And almost everything that he said, this sounds right. This sounds right for Peter Davidson. And so I appreciated that part.
Actually, taking it in the context of the era, this would have come pretty soon after Earthshock. Reilly, is he the Doctor yet?
I don't think it's fair to make that question on a Big Finish. Let's go back to a regular episode.
No, it's certainly not. I'm being cheeky. My opinion is this deserves its reputation. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to do a full roundup of this yet, but I think this is very solid, good character work, and I think that is its strong point. I even think Cyber Leader Zheng actually comes out as a distinctive personality, even though he's a Cyberman. Really, really like him. Then he does come back in a later Big Finish.
Well, they shouldn't put him back at the end and not bring him back.
Right. He is shown to be still alive and kicking at the time that Mondas makes it to Earth in the 10th planet. Put it like that.
I did have a couple of questions, and maybe I'm getting, I wouldn't say nitpicky, but I thought I heard a comment of something about selling the mom.
Yes.
Okay.
You did.
Because when I first heard it, it was kind of made clear that people were having some cyber limbs and things like that, but it wasn't super clear. And what I'm just assuming is that she just had a bunch of parts on her, and that when she died, they sold like her arm or leg or whatever was cyber.
Oh no, there's definitely a market for organic parts as well, because Thomas Dodd has things in cold storage. So I suspect she was sold for both whatever parts were mechanical as well as whatever organs and so on and so forth were still usable.
Spare parts, if you will.
Spare parts. Absolutely.
I didn't like to think about the organic part. I think I just kind of wanted to put that in a corner and not remember that.
Sorry, Julie.
But I think that's one of the things that is considering that it's such a small line that they don't really super give a lot of time to. It was a very interesting point to just note that that's what the economy is. When someone's dead, your choices are sell them. And that's just how dark this world that they have been forced to live in underground, where you're getting tuberculosis. Your only option when someone dies is to sell them for bits, is a pretty bleak existence. And it was a beautiful one-line thing that commits all of that context in one small line.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's very subtle, it's there, and when you think about it, you go, oh God, as Julie just did in real time.
Well, again, I think I knew, but I...
You tried not to think about it.
That one. I'm too I don't know if I call it optimist or what, but I don't like to think that dark. I'm not as dark as you are, Anthony.
Oh boy, you're going to love later eras of the show.
One of the other things, I'm going to shine a little light on our girl Nissa. I really liked the story for her too, especially one of my favorite moments in the whole story is when the doctor's like, brace yourself, Nissa. You can't know where we possibly are. And she's like, duh, on Mondus, this is the Cybermen.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time they're here. Wake up, doctor. Who are you? And I really like that moment of like, if it's obvious to the audience, it should be obvious to the companion, especially when like Nissa. And I like when they don't make the doctor baby step them through realizing what's happening when it's painfully obvious.
Yeah. And I kind of like how they tried to pull that one on us.
Mm-hmm.
It was giving very heavy indications that they were in somewhere between the 1930s and the 1950s on Earth. And the doctor's trying so hard to convince Nissa that's the case. And she's like, stop, I know where we are.
There's one part within the first part with Nissa that I felt was off. Trying to recall, but I believe this is after she's been separated from the doctor and she's with the family. And there are times where they are basically have like coerced her into, I think it was to stay. And I just don't know if that fits with her character. She doesn't seem to be a person that has fear, really. I mean, in my opinion, in this situation, I think she knows what the threat is that she's dealing with, and she feels like she has to find the doctor. And it felt more threatening for her to stay because we don't really know who these characters are that are coercing her to stay, and she does. So I thought that was a little inconsistent. And the other thing that I felt was a bit unnecessary for the story was in part 4, the introduction of the scanning the doctor in order to make better Cybermen element. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I think that one, to me, it reeks a little of we need to pad this out a bit.
Yeah.
It is somewhat threaded through. They do talk about rejection rates and so on, and it is mentioned the doctor's physiognomy will help them remove rejection rates altogether and make it 100% successful on conversion. But I agree, Reilly. I tend not to like the doctor's personal history being intertwined with the show's lore. It's the same reason I have a problem with the Timeless Child as a concept. So the idea that part of Cyberman physiognomy is because they stole from the doctor's physiognomy, I don't really like that.
Yeah, it does sound like, I don't know if you would call it fanwank, but it sounds like...
Oh, it's fanwank.
I guess, yeah, you're right, because they're explaining a backstory, but they're not doing it like off the cuff. They're showing you the backstory, which I guess, would that be considered a reverse fanwank, or is that a little too dirty?
I'm not sure. We'll just go with it's unnecessary. How about that?
Absolutely unnecessary. Other than that, I feel that a lot of this is really strong. I particularly liked the subplot of, as the doctor is dealing with, as we just discussed, the subplot of him being scanned, is like the rising battle outside in town. I think that was really interesting. I like the soundscape of that and the feeling of that. That's just a classic thing where you have like a personal drama going on inside, and then you have a large battle going on the outside at the same time. A very classic Star Wars third act kind of situation. I thought that was very strong.
So I'm actually on the opposite end where I understand that it was a fan wank. It was a fan wank for me. That was personal fan service right there. Because while I agree with you wholeheartedly, nothing, I actually disagree with what you said, but I personally like it and would love it more if they had fleshed this out. What
time is it? What time is it?
No. Hold on. I have to recompose myself. That was awful. If they had really padded this out in other stories after this had been made, because I do like when the doctor has to contend with the guilt of having not been able to stop something and having to stare that basically in the face every time he looks at a Cyberman. If they had continued with that and that had that reflected in other stories, I think I would really love this. But because it kind of stays isolated, it does feel more fan wanky. Because if I got more of the doctor being like, gosh, I'm literally looking at a reflection of myself in some capacity, that horror that would sit on his soul would be so satisfying, because I love it when the doctor has existential trauma.
You just want to torture him.
Yes, you're correct. That's honestly always my favorite doctor, is traumatized and can't tell which way is up.
I prefer my doctors to have a moral anger and righteousness and give a very strong monologue as to why everyone is awful and plead to their better sides. That's why my favorite Doctor is Capaldi.
Diana, how do you feel about when the Doctor is doing the psychological torture for the purposes of making their companion better, asking for a friend?
I mean, look, hurt people hurt people. It's part of why I like the whole concept of watching the whole thing, is because you do get to follow that trauma. And I don't love it, but it is what happens.
Yeah.
That made me have a very hilarious thought, or at least I think it's funny, is that I think it'd be great that as people are being processed into Cybermen, that the Cybermen that are processing the people, as they're about to be processed, the people are pleading, and the Cyberman just goes, hurt people, ching ching.
No.
I think I just came to a realization, and why I really like Troughton is because there's not all of this angst and trauma and hurting people, and everything's a little bit lighter.
Yes, that's true.
Ah.
I say bring back more doctors who play musical instruments. It brings a lightheartedness to it.
And who would like a hat like that?
Always.
Look, he's masking his trauma with comedy, don't we all?
I feel like the Doctor has so many opportunities of, I wouldn't say cliched characters or types, but there are a good amount around that the Doctor would fit. And when you just mentioned that, it kind of falls into like the clown hiding his tears behind laughter is a great concept and would work really well with the Doctor. And I think it kind of was touched on a little bit. I feel like maybe Matt Smith a little bit. Anyway, we're talking too broad here. We got to talk about spare parts.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned every Doctor so far almost.
I had a quick question just because I'm really bad at accents.
Yeah.
Just remind me what their accent was.
Which one's the family?
The Hartleys.
Yeah, they have a northern accent.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's not too far off, in my opinion, from Jodie Whittaker's, actually.
Okay. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it because, not being British, there's only so many that I know.
Right. They definitely have accents from up north.
I couldn't place it. I was like, this sounds familiar. Why does it sound familiar?
And I think all those actors were from Yorkshire. All right, we've meandered quite a lot. This is what happens when I come to this without too much of a structure. But do we want to go ahead and rate this?
Yeah, I want to point out that I think an interesting addition to this, at least in the first two parts, would have been like we had that newsreel, but how about commercials? That would be interesting. Kind of like a RoboCop kind of taste of what things are like. I'd love to hear a Cyberman do like a, come on down to crazy Cybermans. We got different types of parts here. We got left arms. We got robotic right arms. And I think it's silly, but it would have been fun to give a little bit more depth to like the culture, because it just feels like at this point when you walk into the story where things are as a society, it feels like they're already at the breaking point, like where it's almost already all over. I think it would have been more interesting if you saw it maybe a couple steps prior to that.
Interestingly, you just triggered a memory for me, Reilly. I used to be involved with what started out as a fan forum, and then some of the people from the forum started making our own Doctor Who fan audios. And I wrote one of them. And effectively, at the end of, I don't know, the third season of audios we did or something like that, we had a new Doctor slip into and get trapped in a alternate universe. And I wrote a Cyberman origin story that had conversion as religion, kind of Scientology style.
Yeah, I like that.
So we had things like commercials on, get your latest upgrade, get closer to divinity. Yeah, we had like a charismatic actor character who was effectively Tom Cruise doing commercials and hobnobbing with people to convince them to get their next upgrade.
That's much more relevant than the newspaper that I wrote in high school history class with Plague Away in Sir Arthur's Holy Grail surplus store.
Amazing. All right, now we've had that little sidetrack. Let's go ahead and rate this. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Oh.
How about
Really?
that? All right. It's been a while with Big Finish, but do we give? We do.
We give a number, but we don't keep track of it, and we don't compare them.
But do we add a metric? Do we give our score?
Yeah, always metric.
Oh, all right. I regret the decision of going first, but I will go nonetheless. This was as expected. Well, I haven't listened to many Big Finish, but this was particularly strong. I can say without a doubt the storyline and the intensity and the gravitas of this Big Finish is comparable, if not just downright beats out some Doctor Who televised stories. without a doubt. I earlier mentioned that I would have liked to have gotten on Mondas a little bit before we were place was in such dire straits. I don't like the doctor subplot in part 4. The personal drama is fantastic. All the characters all around really fill it out greatly. Soundscape, excellent. I was very impressed. I was very, very impressed. It's one of those stories where it's really, really good, but good Lord, it's quite a bummer. And so it's one of those things like, do I want to come back to this and listen to it again? It's just very depressing. So I'm going to give this 8 cyber body part shops out of 10.
All right. Anyone else ready?
Yeah, I'll go. I enjoyed it. I do often struggle with origin stories, and to that extent, it's not going to necessarily be my absolute favorite, just because with origin stories, they're the things that you have to do to make it make sense. And so much of that is things that we expect out of a Cyberman story, and that was good to kind of be able to follow the baseline and follow the greater story while having all of that emotional turmoil in the middle of it. So I think that's why it works well, but I'm never going to be the necessarily biggest fan of a pure origin story for an established character. But other than that, I absolutely adored it. I thought it was really a good, solid story. And the only problem I really had was I get that we're staying true to those Cybermen voices, but if it's an audio thing and I can't understand them, you have failed the task. You have got to edit it so that I can understand it while still sounding like the original. It's technically possible. And so because of that, I'm going to give it 8.5 personal fanwanks.
All right, Julie, you want to go or you want to go last?
I can go. I mean, I'm pretty much on board with what's already been discussed. It is an excellent story. It's not a rough plot. It's an obvious plot, but it's not a rough plot. Well, okay, it's very sad, but the characters are great. The interactions and where we choose to place some people with each other is great. Some of the worst things is obviously not understanding the Cybermen and the obnoxious brother. He figures out why he's kind of terrible. So at least he gets a little bit of a character arc, so to speak, which I wasn't expecting. But I'm going to give this 8 unfortunate lack of subtitles out of 10.
See, I think this is where I differ from you guys, because I grew up in a time when this was the only new Doctor Who we got. I was a child of the wilderness years, and when this came out, and yes, I know Julie's going to roll her eyes at me getting nostalgic. When this came out, this was the closest thing we had to real new Doctor Who. And the hype around this was huge. And at the time, boy, did it live up to it. This was kind of the character piece that kind of, to some extent, leads into a more modern style of Doctor Who. You know, this isn't a big action-packed story. It really is focused on this little family and the impact that these broader events are having on them. And those moments with characters like Yvonne in her cybersuit, sort of getting memories of who she was, surrounded by her family, reacting in horror to what's happened to her. Holy shit. And so for me, that's what makes this really good. I do love that they went back to the 10th Planet Cybermen and their voices, which I actually find a lot easier than the Tomb of the Cybermen voices, but each their own. And I love that it goes back to the body horror and that this is what could happen and these are the implications of this society. And as Mark Platt wanted to do, that kind of tragedy morality play of if it really got this bad, could we as humans do something like this? And the answer is yes, we could. In fact, things aren't even this bad and we're talking about brain chips and so on right now. I think this is a stunning piece of Doctor Who. I think it's one of the strongest pieces of Doctor Who in any media. And for me, this is a solid 10 out of 10 drunken scientists. So I didn't add everyone's together because I don't normally do that for these, but we were all 8 and above. This is a strong story.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, that brings us to the end of the episode. We'll be back next time with a regular episode. But until then, thank you all so very much for listening. And of course, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Julie Philippek, Reilly Schreck, Diana Burney, and myself, Anthony Williams. This bonus episode, Old School Propaganda, was recorded on Monday the 7th of July 2025. If this is your first time listening in, all of our previous episodes are available through your favourite podcasting app. You can interact with us on Facebook and Instagram at Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and leave us a review or rating on your favourite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, when your world is about to die and your own cybernetic monstrosities are about to run amok, you can always find solace in the bottom of a bottle. Or at least, you can if your name is Dr. Allen.